What if I told you there's a dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene you've never heard? An intimate, profound, revelatory conversation, preserved for over 1,500 years in a place the Western world completely overlooked. An exchange of words so extraordinary that the religious authorities in the West decided you shouldn't know about it. This dialogue exists. It's preserved within the traditions of the Ethiopian Bible. And what it holds challenges everything you thought you knew about the relationship between Jesus and his closest disciple. Mary Magdalene wasn't just another follower lost in the crowd. The canonical Gospels themselves set her apart. She was freed from 7 demons. She stayed at the foot of the cross when the apostles had fled. She was the first person to see the resurrected Christ. She was the first sent to proclaim the most important news in history. But what the canonical Gospels only hint at, the Ethiopian traditions expand upon extensively. Full dialogues, profound revelations, teachings Jesus supposedly shared exclusively with her, acknowledging her as the disciple whose heart was most prepared to receive the mysteries of the kingdom. Why were these traditions preserved only in Ethiopia? Why does the rest of the Christian world remain unaware of them? What do they contain that made them so unsettling to the power structures that defined what was sacred and what should be forgotten? The answers to these questions will lead us into one of the most fascinating and least known chapters in Christian history, a chapter involving ancient manuscripts, monasteries nestled in inaccessible mountains, oral traditions passed down through generations, and a woman whose importance was systematically minimized for centuries. Today we're going to explore the secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. We'll uncover what the Ethiopian texts truly say. We'll examine the evidence supporting the antiquity of these traditions, and we'll understand why this knowledge was kept in one place while the rest of the world lost it. We're not here to chase cheap sensationalism or invent baseless theories. We're here to explore real traditions, preserved by a real church, revered by millions of believers for over a millennium and a half. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is no fringe sect or modern invention. It's one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world, with roots stretching back to the 4th century. Its Bible contains texts that other traditions marginalized. Its traditions preserve memories that others forgot. The dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene is one of those preserved memories, not as a historical curiosity, but as a living tradition, read in liturgies, studied in seminaries, revered by the faithful. Are you ready to learn what Jesus and Mary Magdalene said to each other according to these ancient traditions? Are you curious enough to explore revelations the Western world suppressed? Are you prepared to encounter a Mary Magdalene completely different from the one you were taught? Because what comes next will transform your understanding of this extraordinary woman and her relationship with the Master. And once you're familiar with these traditions, you'll never read the Gospels the same way again. The secret dialogue is about to be revealed. Words held captive for centuries are about to be heard. Join me on this extraordinary journey. To truly grasp the secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene preserved in Ethiopian traditions, we first need to understand the extraordinary context of the church that safeguarded it. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church stands as one of the oldest Christian communities globally. According to tradition, Christianity arrived in Ethiopia in the 1st century with the conversion of the Ethiopian eunuch mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles. Systematic evangelization took hold in the 4th century with Frumentius, who was consecrated bishop by Athanasius of Alexandria. But Ethiopia's connection to biblical traditions runs even deeper. Ethiopians claim descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Their national book, the Kebra Nagast, narrates how the Ark of the Covenant was brought to Ethiopia where, believers assert, it remains to this day. This identity as a chosen people, direct heir to divine promises, profoundly shaped Ethiopian Christianity. Its Bible isn't merely a translation of Western canons. It's a distinctive collection that includes texts other traditions rejected, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and other writings that preserve traditions from Second Temple Judaism and early Christianity. Ethiopia's geographic isolation was crucial for this preservation. The Ethiopian mountains, some soaring over 13,000 feet high, created a natural barrier. Decisions from Western councils held no automatic authority over these communities. When Rome marginalized certain texts, Ethiopia was free to continue revering them. The traditions concerning Mary Magdalene that Ethiopia preserved stem from this context of independence and antiquity. They aren't late Ethiopian inventions. They are traditions inherited from early Christianity that were suppressed elsewhere but found refuge in the African mountains. Mary Magdalene holds a special place in Ethiopian devotion. She's celebrated with her own feast days. Her images appear in illuminated manuscripts. Her story is recounted in homilies and oral traditions. She's not a minor figure, but a revered saint whose testimony is considered foundational. The title, Apostle to the Apostles, that Ethiopian tradition bestows upon her acknowledges her chronological precedence. Before any apostle preached, Mary Magdalene announced the resurrection. Her mission preceded and laid the groundwork for all others. This recognition, common in Eastern Christianity, was downplayed in the West but preserved in Ethiopia. Ethiopian texts containing traditions about Mary Magdalene include JES versions of works known in other languages, but also developments that may be unique to this tradition. JES, the Ethiopian liturgical language, preserved texts that disappeared in Greek or Latin. Ethiopian monasteries functioned as strongholds of preservation. In sometimes inaccessible locations, communities of monks dedicated generations to copying sacred manuscripts. This scribal tradition guaranteed the survival of texts that otherwise would have been completely lost. The relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, according to Ethiopian traditions, isn't the distorted image the West developed. The mistaken conflation with the repentant sinner, promoted by Gregory the Great in the 6th century, was never adopted in Ethiopia. Their Mary Magdalene is the devout disciple, the privileged witness, the receiver of revelations. If this journey into Ethiopian traditions and Mary Magdalene is challenging what you thought you knew, imagine all that's still left to uncover. This channel exists to explore truths preserved in traditions the world often overlooks, to honor knowledge kept in unexpected places. Join this community of explorers by hitting that subscribe button. We don't promise easy answers, but we do promise an honest journey into truths that deserve to be known. Now, let's continue uncovering exactly what these extraordinary texts reveal. The traditions preserved in Ethiopia and associated texts unveil a dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene that goes far beyond what the canonical Gospels record. Texts known as the Gospel of Mary, preserved in Coptic manuscripts but representative of the type of tradition Ethiopia helped safeguard, present an extraordinary scenario. After the resurrection, the disciples are troubled, fearful, unsure of what to do. It's Mary Magdalene who comforts them and begins to reveal teachings the Lord communicated exclusively to her. According to these texts, Jesus reportedly told Mary, "Blessed are you, who were not disturbed when you saw me. For where the mind is, there is the treasure." This statement establishes Mary's spiritual stability, her capacity to receive revelations without being troubled, her readiness for mysteries others couldn't bear. Mary then asks the Lord how the visionary perceives the vision. The response attributed to Jesus is profound. It does not see through the soul nor through the spirit, but the mind that is between the two is what sees the vision. This teaching on the nature of spiritual perception places knowledge beyond ordinary categories. It's neither the emotional soul nor the abstract spirit, but something in between, the contemplative mind, that allows access to higher realities. The dialogue continues with Mary revealing to the other disciples what Jesus showed her about the ascent of the soul. The soul must pass through different powers that try to stop it: desire, ignorance, wrath. To each power, the soul responds with affirmations of its true nature, its liberation, its celestial origin. Desire says to the soul, "I did not see you descend, but now I see you ascend. Why do you lie, if you belong to me?" The soul responds, "I saw you, but you did not see me or recognize me. I served you as a garment, and you did not know me." This image of the soul serving desire as a garment suggests that passions were a temporary appearance, not true identity. The soul acknowledges having experienced desire but not being defined by it. This understanding allows for liberation. Ignorance questions the soul in a similar manner. The soul replies, "You judge, but you were not judged. You ruled, but you were not ruled. You did not know me, but I knew you. You were my garment, and though you clothed me, you did not know me." Finally, wrath in its four forms, darkness, desire for death, realm of the flesh, enraged wisdom, confronts the soul. But the soul that has understood its nature transcends them and reaches repose in silence. These teachings, attributed to revelations Jesus shared with Mary, describe a path of inner liberation. The human soul can pass through the powers that bind it because its true nature is superior to them. The knowledge of this truth is the key to liberation. The Pistis Sophia, another text preserved by Eastern tradition, further expands the dialogue. In it, Mary Magdalene asks more questions than any other disciple. Jesus praises her repeatedly. "Blessed are you among all women on earth, for you shall be the fullness of all fullnesses and the perfection of all perfections." These accolades aren't empty courtesy. They acknowledge a spiritual capacity that distinguishes Mary. Her understanding surpasses that of the other disciples. Her heart is more attuned to the mysteries of the kingdom. Why were these traditions suppressed in the West? Research suggests that Mary Magdalene's prominence as a spiritual authority didn't align with emerging patriarchal structures. Teachings on the ascent of the soul had affinities with Gnostic groups that orthodoxy rejected. The diversity these texts represented threatened the doctrinal unity that councils sought. To truly understand the secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, we need to examine fundamental concepts that are often misunderstood. The first crucial concept is knowledge, or gnosis, within the context of these texts. It doesn't refer to intellectual information, but to a transformative experience. To know in this sense is to be transformed by what is known. Mary Magdalene knows because she has been transformed by her encounter with the resurrected one. The texts distinguish between ordinary knowledge and salvific knowledge. The former can accumulate without changing the person. The latter radically transforms the one who receives it. The dialogue between Jesus and Mary conveys this second type of knowledge. When Jesus reveals to Mary the mysteries of the soul's ascent, he isn't providing abstract information. He's communicating an understanding that, when genuinely received, liberates. Knowledge and liberation are inseparable in this view. The second fundamental concept is that of the perfect disciple. Texts honoring Mary Magdalene present her as a model of discipleship, not an exception. What she achieved is available to others. Her example inspires more than it intimidates. Perfection in this context doesn't mean absence of flaws, but fullness of orientation. Mary's heart is completely oriented toward the kingdom. This total orientation is the perfection Jesus recognizes and praises. The other disciples in these texts often appear confused, fearful, skeptical. Mary comforts them, guides them, teaches them. Her role isn't subordinate but directive. She is a teacher because she has received superior instruction. The third concept deserving attention is silence as a spiritual goal. The soul that has passed through the powers achieves repose in silence. This silence isn't emptiness, but fullness. It's the cessation of disturbances, the end of questioning, the peace that transcends understanding. The dialogue, paradoxically, leads to silence. Jesus' words to Mary prepare her for what lies beyond words. Verbal communication is a means, not an end. The destination is the stillness where knowledge is complete. The fourth key concept is the nature of the soul in these texts. The soul isn't simply the counterpart to the body. It's the life principle that can be bound by lower powers or liberated to ascend to its origin. Desire, ignorance, wrath aren't external to the soul. They are conditions of the unliberated soul. The journey of ascent isn't spatial movement but qualitative transformation. The soul that recognizes its true nature is no longer bound, even if it remains in the same place. Jesus' teaching to Mary reveals the soul's own nature. This self-knowledge is the foundation of liberation. No outer journey is required, but rather inner recognition. Mary receives this knowledge and transmits it to others. We've just seen how fundamental concepts like gnosis, the perfect disciple, silence, and the soul help us understand the dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. But I'm curious, which of these revelations surprised you most? Did you realize that knowledge in these texts means transformation, not just information? Were you familiar with the image of the soul passing through powers to achieve repose? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading your reflections, and who knows, maybe your comment will inspire the next topic we explore together. Now let's dive even deeper into these mysteries. To fully appreciate the secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, we need to immerse ourselves in the world of early Christianity, where these traditions originated. The 1st and 2nd centuries were a time of extraordinary spiritual creativity. The Jesus movement was defining its identity, developing its teachings, exploring the implications of its faith. There wasn't yet a single orthodoxy or a closed canon. Multiple voices contributed to the emerging tradition. Within this context, traditions concerning Mary Magdalene flourished in various directions. Some communities emphasized her role as a witness to the resurrection. Others developed her special relationship with Jesus. Still others presented her as a recipient of revelations that complemented or expanded the Master's public teachings. Communities often labeled Gnostic were particularly devoted to Mary Magdalene. For them, saving knowledge included esoteric teachings, communicated to select circles, preserved in texts that the majority communities would eventually marginalize. But it would be a mistake to exclusively identify the veneration of Mary Magdalene with Gnosticism. Even authors who would be considered orthodox honored her. Hippolytus of Rome called her apostle to the apostles. Origen discussed her with respect. Mary's prominence wasn't the sole property of any single faction. The first-century Mediterranean world was familiar with diverse models of female spiritual authority. Prophetesses, priestesses, teachers. Women held significant religious roles in multiple traditions. Early Christianity, with its relatively egalitarian message, initially didn't exclude women from leadership. Paul's authentic letters mention female collaborators in the gospel. Priscilla teaches Apollos. Phoebe is a deaconess. Junia is called prominent among the apostles. This context makes it understandable that traditions about Mary Magdalene as an authoritative teacher circulated and were accepted. The communities that preserved the dialogues between Jesus and Mary likely valued direct mystical experience, personal revelation, transformative knowledge. These communities existed in Egypt, Syria, perhaps other regions. Their texts, though eventually marginalized, preserved genuinely ancient traditions. Ethiopia, when it received Christianity, inherited traditions that included this prominence of Mary Magdalene. Its connection with Alexandria, a center of diverse and speculative Christianity, facilitated the transmission of texts and traditions that would be suppressed elsewhere. Ethiopian JESUS translated texts from Greek and Coptic. These translations preserved what the lost originals contained. When Greek manuscripts vanished, the Ethiopian versions endured, copied generation after generation in remote monasteries. Oral tradition complemented the written. Stories about Mary Magdalene, about her dialogues with Jesus, about her teachings to the disciples, were passed down from teachers to students, from preachers to the faithful. This living tradition can preserve elements not captured in any known text. Ethiopian isolation protected these traditions from the homogenization processes that affected Mediterranean Christianity. When councils decided what was orthodox and what was heretical, Ethiopia was able to maintain its inherited patrimony without pressures for conformity. The story of the secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene can be recounted as a history of flourishing, suppression, and rediscovery. In the early centuries of Christianity, traditions about Mary Magdalene as a recipient of special revelations circulated widely. The texts preserving them were copied, read, venerated. They weren't marginal or suspect, but rather part of the common spiritual heritage. The Gospel of Mary, the Pistis Sophia, traditions concerning post-resurrection dialogues. All of this existed in communities that considered themselves genuinely Christian. Diversity was the norm, not the exception. Different communities honored different texts, emphasized different aspects of the tradition. The shift came with the institutionalization of Christianity. When the faith became an imperial religion, the need arose to define orthodoxy. Which texts were truly sacred? Which should be rejected? Who held the authority to decide? The councils that addressed these questions operated under multiple pressures. The unity of the empire demanded a unified religion. The episcopal structures, they needed to control who was teaching what. Texts that presented alternative models of authority became problematic. Traditions portraying Mary Magdalene as an authoritative teacher threatened the emerging structures. If a woman had received revelations superior to those of the male apostles, what did that mean for male ecclesiastical hierarchies? The answer was to sideline these texts. Her association with Gnostic groups accelerated this marginalization. Once Gnosticism was defined as heresy, anything connected to it became suspect. Texts honoring Mary Magdalene were rejected alongside other teachings deemed deviant. In the West, this marginalization culminated in distortion. Mary Magdalene the Apostle became Mary Magdalene the repentant prostitute. The authoritative teacher was transformed into a redeemed sinner. The erroneous conflation with other gospel figures promoted by Pope Gregory the Great, sealed this transformation. For over a millennium, this distorted image dominated the Western world. Art depicted her with symbols of her supposed sinful past. Sermons used her as an example of repentance, not spiritual authority. The secret dialogue was utterly forgotten. Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, ancient traditions persisted. There was no conflation with the sinner, no reduction to a passive figure. Mary Magdalene remained the apostle to the apostles, a privileged witness, a recipient of revelations. The Western rediscovery began in the 20th century. The Nag Hammadi manuscripts, unearthed in 1945, revealed texts the West had long forgotten. The Gospel of Mary, though fragmentary, showcased a radically different tradition. Subsequent academic research reconstructed the historical Mary Magdalene. The identification with the sinner was refuted. Her significance in Jesus' movement was recognized. The dialogues preserved in ancient texts were seriously studied. In 2016, the Catholic Church elevated the celebration of Mary Magdalene to a feast day, acknowledging her role as apostle to the apostles. After centuries of distortion, the West began to reclaim what Ethiopia had never forgotten. The story of the secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene involves multiple distortions that we must identify to access the oldest traditions. The first and most significant distortion was the conflation of Mary Magdalene with the anonymous sinner from Luke's Gospel. This woman, described as a sinner in the city, anoints Jesus' feet with perfume and tears. Nothing in Luke suggests she is Mary Magdalene. They are entirely distinct characters in the Gospel account. Nevertheless, Pope Gregory the Great, in the 6th century, identified them as the same person. This conflation, without textual basis, created the image of the repentant prostitute that dominated the West for over a millennium. The distortion was not accidental. It served to diminish the authority of a woman whose prominence was inconvenient. The second distortion was the conflation with Mary of Bethany. This Mary, sister of Lazarus and Martha, also anointed Jesus and sat at his feet listening. Combining these figures added confusion but allowed for certain convenient narrative developments. The third distortion was the modern sexualization of her relationship with Jesus. Contemporary novels portray her as Jesus' wife or lover, the mother of his children, the guardian of secret bloodlines. While these narratives are popular, they have little to do with the actual ancient texts. Texts that speak of Jesus' special love for Mary use spiritual, not romantic language. When the Pistis Sophia states that Mary is loved more than the other disciples, it refers to her superior spiritual understanding, not physical attraction. Reading romance where the texts describe discipleship fundamentally distorts their meaning. The fourth distortion is conspiratorial appropriation. Certain popular literature presents the secret dialogue as evidence of Vatican conspiracies, knowledge hidden by malicious elites, and truths suppressed for sinister motives. While these narratives are entertaining, they oversimplify complex historical processes. The marginalization of traditions concerning Mary Magdalene was not a centralized conspiracy. It was a gradual process, the result of many decisions made for diverse reasons in different contexts. Some of these reasons involved gender and power. Others involved definitions of orthodoxy. Still others involved ecclesiastical politics. The fifth distortion is excessive idealization in the opposite direction. Some contemporary readings portray Mary Magdalene as an early feminist leader, the head of an egalitarian Christianity suppressed by patriarchy. While there are true elements to this perspective, oversimplification doesn't do justice to historical complexity. Early Christianity wasn't simply egalitarian versus patriarchal. It was diverse in ways that don't easily fit modern categories. Mary Magdalene was important, but the reasons for her importance weren't identical to what we value today. Recovering the secret dialogue requires careful navigation through all these distortions. We must reject the image of the repentant prostitute. We must avoid undue sexualizations. We must resist conspiratorial theories. We must refrain from imposing contemporary agendas. The Ethiopian tradition offers a valuable perspective precisely because it escaped several of these distortions. Its Mary Magdalene isn't a prostitute because that identification was never adopted. She is an apostle because that tradition was preserved. But she's also not a figure of modern fantasies. Ethiopian texts deserve to be read on their own terms, not as confirmation of preconceived theories. What they reveal about the dialogue between Jesus and Mary is extraordinary enough without needing to add distortions. The evidence supporting the existence of ancient traditions about special dialogues between Jesus and Mary Magdalene is substantial and diverse. The first piece of evidence comes from the canonical Gospels themselves. All four Gospels give prominence to Mary Magdalene in the accounts of the Passion and Resurrection. John develops a direct dialogue between her and the risen one. This canonical prominence forms the foundation for traditions that expanded upon it. The fact that a woman is presented as the first witness to the resurrection is historically significant. In the ancient world, female testimony held less legal weight than male. If early Christians had invented the story, they likely would have placed a man as the primary witness. Mary's presence suggests genuine memory. The second piece of evidence comes from the Nag Hammadi discoveries. The Coptic manuscripts found in 1945 include the Gospel of Mary, which features extensive dialogues between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Although the Nag Hammadi manuscript dates to the 4th century, the text it copies is older. Scholars date the original composition to the 2nd century. This demonstrates that traditions concerning special dialogues circulated early on. They weren't late inventions. The third piece of evidence is the Pistis Sophia, an extensive Coptic text that portrays Mary Magdalene as the primary interrogator of the resurrected Jesus. In this text, she asks more questions than any other disciple and receives repeated praise for her understanding. The phrases attributed to Jesus in the Pistis Sophia are remarkable. "Blessed are you among all women on earth, for you shall be the fullness of all fullness." Such expressions reflect a profound veneration that couldn't have emerged from nowhere. The fourth line of evidence comes from the Church Fathers. Hippolytus of Rome in the 3rd century calls Mary Magdalene the Apostle to the Apostles. This title, which acknowledges her precedence as a proclaimer of the resurrection, comes from a recognized bishop, not from marginal groups. Origen, Clement of Alexandria, and other patristic authors mention Mary Magdalene with respect. While not all of them accepted the more elaborate texts about her, her fundamental importance was widely recognized. The fifth piece of evidence is the continuous Ethiopian tradition. The Ethiopian Church has venerated Mary Magdalene uninterruptedly for over 15 centuries. Her feast day is celebrated. Her images appear in manuscripts. Her story is taught and preached. Specific Ethiopian manuscripts containing material on Mary Magdalene are currently being cataloged and studied. Some preserve Ge'ez versions of known texts. Others may contain unique developments. The complete corpus has not yet been fully analyzed. Ethiopian oral tradition complements the written texts. Stories not appearing in any known manuscript circulate within devout communities. This living tradition may preserve echoes of even older traditions. We've explored fascinating evidence concerning the secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. But now I'd like to hear from you. Where are you watching this video from? What city or state are you joining us from on this quest for knowledge about the hidden traditions of Christianity? Type your location in the comments below. It's fascinating to see how people from all over the world are seeking the same answers about the mysteries of faith. And now, let's move on to one of the most revealing chapters of this story. To understand why the secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene was suppressed in the West but preserved in Ethiopia, we need to examine the power dynamics at play in the ancient church. Early Christianity recognized multiple forms of authority. Prophets and prophetesses spoke with direct inspiration. Itinerant teachers moved from community to community. Apostles claimed commission from the Lord himself. Local elders governed congregations. Authority was diverse and fluid. In this context, figures like Mary Magdalene could claim authority based on direct experience. She had seen the risen one. She had received revelations. She had been commissioned as a messenger. Her authority didn't depend on institutional appointments, but on personal encounter. As Christianity became institutionalized, this charismatic model grew problematic. Emerging episcopal structures needed to control who held authority to teach. Apostolic succession, ordination, and institutional credentials gradually replaced charismatic experience as the source of legitimacy. Texts that presented Mary Magdalene as a recipient of special revelations legitimized forms of authority that the structures couldn't control. If a woman from the past had received superior teachings directly from the Lord, who could claim comparable authority today? The implications were destabilizing. The question of gender complicated matters. The pastoral epistles, likely from the 2nd century, already restricted female roles. "I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man." These restrictions reflect real debates about who could exercise leadership. Mary Magdalene, as an authoritative teacher, directly contradicted these emerging restrictions. Texts honoring her challenged norms that orthodoxy was establishing. Marginalizing these texts helped consolidate structures where women were excluded from leadership. Her association with Gnosticism provided additional justification. Once orthodoxy defined Gnosticism as heresy, associated texts were condemned by extension. It didn't matter if they contained genuinely ancient traditions. Their use by rejected groups contaminated them. The transformation of Mary Magdalene from apostle to prostitute completed the process. A repentant sinner, no matter how holy she became, couldn't claim the authority of a privileged witness. Distorting her past undermined the legitimacy of her testimony. Ethiopia escaped these dynamics due to its geographical and political position. Its church wasn't as integrated into imperial structures. Its traditions evolved with greater independence. The authority of Western councils wasn't automatically binding. Isolation also meant less pressure to homogenize. When Rome decided which texts to reject, Ethiopia could simply continue with its inherited traditions. There was no external force compelling them to conform. The Ethiopian ecclesiastical structure also differed. Monasteries held considerable power. Oral tradition carried weight alongside written tradition. The model of authority was less centralized than the Roman one. In this context, diverse traditions could coexist more easily. It's important to avoid oversimplifications. There wasn't a single conspiracy to suppress the secret dialogue. The process was gradual, the result of many decisions. Some genuinely involved gender. Others involved theological orthodoxy. Still others involved ecclesiastical politics. What we can affirm is that traditions concerning Mary Magdalene as a spiritual authority were marginalized by processes that had dimensions of power. Acknowledging this doesn't invalidate Orthodox tradition, but it significantly complicates it. Let's directly examine what the ancient texts say about the dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. The Gospel of John provides the canonical foundation. Chapter 20 narrates the encounter in the garden. Mary weeps by the empty tomb. She sees someone she believes to be the gardener. He asks, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" She responds by asking for information about where the body was taken. Then comes the moment of recognition. Jesus simply says, "Mary," and she responds, "Rabboni," which means teacher. In that exchange of names, everything changes. The voice that pronounces her name is unmistakable. Jesus then says, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary goes and announces, "I have seen the Lord," conveying what he told her. The Gospel of Mary expands on this encounter. After an appearance to the gathered disciples, Mary comforts them and begins to reveal teachings the Lord communicated to her in a vision. The preserved words include the dialogue about the vision. Mary asks, "Lord, when someone sees a vision, does he see it through the soul or through the spirit?" The Savior replies, "He does not see through the soul nor through the spirit, but rather the mind that is between the two is what sees the vision." The text continues with Mary revealing the soul's ascent through different powers. Desire interrogates, "I did not see you descend, but now I see you ascend. Why do you lie, since you belong to me?" The soul replies, "I saw you, but you did not see me. I served you as a garment, and you did not know me." Ignorance is similarly confronted. The soul declares, "You judged, but were not judged. You ruled, but were not ruled. You did not know me, but I knew you." Wrath in four forms: darkness, desire for death, kingdom of the flesh, wrathful wisdom, is the final confrontation. The soul that has understood its nature transcends them and achieves rest in silence. The Pistis Sophia presents more extensive dialogues. Mary inquires about diverse mysteries, the destiny of souls, different levels of initiation, cosmic powers, and the repentances of Pistis Sophia herself. Jesus' responses are elaborate, filled with complex cosmology, but interspersed are repeated praises for Mary. "Blessed are you, Mary. Your heart is more directed toward the kingdom of heaven than all your brothers." In a notable passage, Jesus says, "Mary, you blessed one, whom I will perfect in all the mysteries of the heights. Speak freely, you whose heart is more uplifted toward the kingdom than all your brothers." When Peter protests Mary's prominence, Jesus rebukes him. Mary's authority is established by the Lord himself. It doesn't depend on the acceptance of the other disciples. These texts aren't history in the modern sense. They are theological reflections, developments of what communities believed the encounter between Jesus and Mary signified. But they preserve genuinely ancient traditions about how some communities understood this relationship. After examining the secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, preserved in Ethiopian traditions, the crucial question arises: how do we integrate these perspectives into our understanding of faith? The first necessary reconciliation is between the canonical Gospels and the additional texts. The Gospels provide the undeniable foundation. Mary Magdalene was a privileged witness to the resurrection. John narrates a direct dialogue with the risen one. This is a solid starting point. The additional texts don't contradict this foundation. They expand upon it, develop it, and explore its implications. We can value them without placing them at the same level of authority as the canonical Gospels. Different texts hold different levels of authority, but all can contribute to our understanding. The second reconciliation is between different Christian traditions. The Ethiopian Church preserves traditions that other churches marginalized. This diversity can be viewed as either a problem or a richness. We prefer to see it as a richness. Christianity has always been diverse. Different traditions preserve different emphases, different experiences, different wisdoms. The Ethiopian Church can teach us things about Mary Magdalene that the West forgot. This doesn't mean that all traditions are equally correct in every respect. It means we must approach differences with humility, recognizing that no single tradition holds a monopoly on truth. We can learn from one another. The third reconciliation is between the historical Mary Magdalene and devotional images. We know little with certainty about the historical woman. The Gospels provide few biographical details. Later texts develop her figure in directions that may or may not correspond to historical realities. But devotional images hold their own value, even if they aren't biographically precise. The Mary Magdalene of Ethiopian devotion, the Mary Magdalene of Gnostic texts, all express something true about how communities found meaning in her figure. The fourth reconciliation is between charismatic and institutional authority. Texts that present Mary as a recipient of special revelations raise questions about authority. Who can legitimately teach? Where does spiritual authority originate? Institutions provide stability and communal verification. Charisma provides freshness and renewal. Both are necessary. Traditions about Mary remind us that spiritual authority doesn't always flow through institutional channels. This invites humility, not anarchy. The fifth reconciliation is between knowledge and mystery. Texts about the secret dialogue reveal profound teachings, but also point beyond themselves. The soul that completes its journey achieves rest in silence. Words lead beyond words. Genuine faith coexists with mystery. Not everything can be explained or resolved. Mary Magdalene remains, in a sense, a figure of mystery. The dialogues, the texts we've preserved raise as many questions as they answer. This openness is an invitation, not a flaw. The secret dialogue isn't meant to provide all the answers. It aims to guide us toward a reality that transcends what can be articulated. The knowledge it imparts is transformative, not merely informational. To genuinely embrace these teachings is to be changed by them. Mary Magdalene, as a model of discipleship, illuminates a path. Her heart oriented toward the kingdom, her capacity to receive without being shaken, her willingness to transmit what she received. All of this exemplifies possibilities that remain open for those who seek. Together, we've journeyed down an extraordinary path through ancient and forgotten traditions, through texts preserved against all odds, and through a woman whose significance was minimized for centuries, yet whose voice refuses to be silenced. The secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene emerges from this journey as a testament to a spiritual relationship of extraordinary depth. She wasn't simply a disciple among many. She was the disciple whose heart was most attuned to the kingdom. She was the first witness, the first messenger, the apostle to the apostles. Ethiopian traditions preserved what the West forgot. In remote mountain monasteries, generations of monks copied texts that vanished elsewhere. Their silent fidelity safeguarded a treasure for all humanity. The dialogue preserved in these texts speaks of inner transformation. The soul that recognizes its true nature can transcend the powers that bind it. Desire, ignorance, and wrath hold no sway over one who has understood. The knowledge Mary received and transmitted isn't abstract information, but a path to liberation. The distortion of Mary Magdalene into a repentant prostitute was a historical injustice that is only now beginning to be corrected. For over a millennium, an authoritative teacher was reduced to a redeemed sinner. Her prophetic voice was silenced. Her example of perfect discipleship was obscured. But truth finds a way. Ethiopia safeguarded what others lost. The Nag Hammadi discoveries brought to light what had been buried. Academic research recovered what tradition distorted. Mary Magdalene is being rediscovered. If you've come this far, you've participated in this rediscovery. You've listened to the secret dialogue. You've encountered a Mary Magdalene different from the one you were taught. You've explored traditions most people overlook. The journey doesn't end here. The Ethiopian texts contain more than we could explore. Oral traditions remain vibrant. Research continues. There's always more to uncover about this extraordinary woman and her relationship with the Master. The words Jesus spoke to her, according to these traditions, continue to resonate. Blessed are you, Mary, whose heart is more directed toward the kingdom than all your brethren. This commendation invites all seekers to likewise orient their hearts. We've reached the end of this extraordinary journey into the secret dialogue between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, preserved in the Ethiopian Bible. If you've come this far, it's because you're one of those individuals who seek profound knowledge, who value traditions safeguarded in unexpected places, who understand that the richness of Christianity extends far beyond what any single tradition can capture. This channel exists for people just like you. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. We have so much more to explore together about forgotten traditions, preserved texts, and the mysteries of faith that deserve to be known. Your companionship on this path means everything. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. And now, another video will appear on your screen to continue expanding your perspective on the secrets of ancient Christianity. Don't stop here. The quest for knowledge never ends. Mary Magdalene saw the resurrected Lord. She received revelations that others couldn't bear. She transmitted them to those prepared to listen. Her example remains an invitation. The secret dialogue has been revealed. Words kept hidden for centuries have been shared, and you, by completing this journey, have become an heir to traditions that cross millennia to reach you. The soul that has understood can transcend the powers and find repose in silence. May these ancient words illuminate your path.